members of the St. Kitts-Nevis Press Corps to ask for questions. State the media house you represent as well as your name.
What has been the official response of the government on efforts made to partner with them to address the crime situation? What are your thoughts on the government bringing in Jamaican officers to assist with crime? And in your opinion, are the punishments for crime committed sufficient, or are changes needed to be made?
Totally ignored. We have asked now for over 2 years, and we have had no response. So they totally ignored. As a matter of fact, they discovered a little over a year ago that they had set up such a meeting like with civil society and something. We were not invited. So clearly they were saying that 90-something or whatever, and then he launches an attack on Dr. Douglas. So I think that is the appropriate response that we get whenever this situation comes. So there is no looking forward and no removing of the politics from the situation when we are saying that there have to be some things that are beyond politics, and crime is one of them. And we are prepared to sit with the government and other civic organizations to at least let the country know that we are united at least in our fight against crime.
Could we have the next 3 journalists asking a series of questions, please?
Question to Mr. Mina. You made reference in your remarks that the government, well, then opposition, had created the illusion that the government was solely responsible for crime. Is it a case where you believe that, as is today, that government is the sole cause of the crime upsurge that we have in the country in terms of carrying out the responsibilities or not carrying out the responsibilities? And if that's the case, would you not be making the same mistake that the then opposition made, criticizing government as the sole cause of crime when there are other factors involved? And I know, everybody at the head table had said earlier that, it is not your intention to politicize crime, but of course, by default, with the information coming or with this coming from the Labour Party, automatically people are going to look at it in a political light. How do you intend to sort of overcome that hurdle, and what actions will the Labour Party be taking in the event that you get no results, no response from government, no response from civil society? Will you just continue to make the calls with no response, or will there be definitive action taken by the Labour Party in that regard? And that's my last question, Mr. Hanley, you made a correlation between the social programs that the Labour Party administration implemented and the fact that these were removed. This could be a cause of crime. And I just want, for clarity's sake, are you saying that this is one of the main factors that has led to the upsurge in crime, the removal of the social programs? And if such, do you have any data to make that connection?
German Abel, SKN5. To MP Maynard, you guys are saying that the government themselves, or the government, is basically not handling crime in a wholesome manner with regards to combating the problem. But then you guys are saying also that Dr. Harris specifically is not doing a good job as the minister with responsibility for national security. Don't you think it's a bit strange that you're saying he should resign and pass that portfolio on to another minister when you're criticizing the entire administration basically for not dealing with the crime situation properly? With regards to the national discussion, do you guys actually foresee that you will get to establish or basically get to hold a national discussion on the matter of crime when for the last 2 years basically you guys have been calling for a national dialogue on this and you have not had a favorable response? Do you think going forward you will actually have a discussion on this matter? And finally, where do you guys see this problem going? I mean, elections is pending, but crime, and as it is being said, basically, crime is a social problem. Where do you guys see that you're going to resolve the problem, whether you're in office or you're out of office, seeing that the general consensus is crime is a social problem?
Good afternoon, everyone. LK Hewlett, Win FM 98.9. Almost said Mr. Prime Minister, sorry. Dr. Douglas, how would you rate the previous Labour administration's performance as it relates to the fight against crime? Because I would recall that the highest number of murders, well, we say homicides, for a particular year happened under your watch. And we didn't have a year we had 35? Okay. But we had some alarming numbers under your watch when, I recall, after Dr. Harris would have left or would have been ousted from the party, he referred to you as the crime minister, and he said you were basically responsible for crime, and we were murder central, and all the other references that he made to the country. Would you say, and in regards to the social media nonsense, you all are calling for them to take action against it? From the sources in the know, they are the creators of it, from what we're hearing. So how can you ask them to police themselves? It's even being said that these persons under these false profiles, of course, are posting what they are being sent from very high positions, and that they are, in fact, being paid as consultants to be on social media attacking persons.
With regard to, we've been calling and nothing has been happening, therefore, what do we do? And that has been hinted by another of our reporters here. I believe the time will come where the St. Kitts-Nevis Labour Party or the parliamentary opposition will have to begin to do this consultation ourselves. That is spearheading it. We believe that a commission, however, we cannot initiate a commission. A commission has to be done properly. It has to be an instrument of the state, if you would want to call it that. But if there isn't any attempt being made by the government to bring the society together to discuss these matters, we will have to initiate it. Of course, again, as we have said, the matter of crime cannot be partisan. It has to involve the people of the country. There has to be a measure of inclusiveness. And that is why, even though we call, we have not led on it, because we believe it should be led by the government. We will participate. We believe that civil society will participate. We believe that individuals who are genuinely concerned about the state of affairs will participate. But if this goes unanswered, as we have seen for some time, I am sure that the Labour Party and the parliamentary opposition will eventually mobilize resources and come together and do what the government should be doing. In other words, we will displace the government in this particular matter. That is what I think we will have to do. The question was being asked with regard to what is our position on Jamaicans providing support in the police force. Our position is that if Jamaicans are highly trained and they are capable of improving the situation, why not? But of course, we must say it must not be at the expense of those who are local and who have the same capacity. What we have noticed is that those who have come recently have all been retired. And so one wonders why only retired people the Prime Minister is hiring as consultants. Are the consultants to whom? Himself as the Minister of National Security, or are the consultants to the Commissioner of Police, who it would appear is more highly trained than them? and who, of course, are significantly less paid than them because their salaries are enormously high. And so these are the comments that we have to make because our people must be aware of the circumstances in which we are attracting help and support from other countries. We have no problem in the sense that they are CARICOM brothers and sisters. We have that freedom of movement, especially for professional people. But why them and not others if there are others here? We understand, for example, it's all over the social media. Again, the same social media, that one of our assistant commissioners of police is being asked to go to the prison to become a superintendent of prisons. A demotion, obviously, when in fact people who are retired and are of the similar rank or lower rank than him are being brought in as consultants into the police force. These are the things which we said are very contradictory, confusing, and creating, to a large extent, uncertainty in the minds of the people of this country, because the government does not speak anymore truthfully for itself. It speaks to the people of our country through fake news, fake media profiles, which we continue to insist should be investigated. I was threatened, you would recall, on social media by one of those characters. I had a very strong feeling as to who it was. In fact, at that time it was Mabel Richards, and people were saying it was the Prime Minister himself who was writing these things. And I took a very serious approach to this matter. I understand, of course, that maybe it may not have been him because he responded with a lawyer and so forth and so forth. that is how he responded. He put me to a lawyer. But the whole point is that the situation has not changed. Because I then made a formal complaint. I wrote a letter, made a formal complaint, sat down with the officers. They told me that they had the capability within the police force to determine who Mabel Richards was. And lo and behold, after several months in Parliament, the Prime Minister himself made reference to it, said that I was responded to. I was never responded to. But 2 days after, I got a letter. 2 days after, I got a letter saying that they no longer had the capability of determining who Mabel Richards was. I mean, this is a joke. And so again, we continue to call for a serious approach to deal with this problem of crime in the police force. Whether the punishment is sufficient or it needs to be changed, we believe that all of these matters can be properly pursued in discussion with our people. It is not what we as a party or as individual parliamentarians believe, but it is what the society believes. And we believe that there are scientific ways of determining these things, and also based on the practice, the jurisprudence practice, what has been the judicious legal systems and what we have seen in other countries. Our laws are very, very similar. And where we would have done the research that those which have tried in particular punishments that they have worked, naturally we would want to adopt them as well here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I stop you for now because I think other people must want to comment. But because there are other things on the table, removal of social programs if they lead to crime. I don't know if you want to do that directly.
With regards to the question, we would have recognized that there were a number of programs that the Labour administration would have introduced, which would have been keeping our young persons engaged in various forms in terms of skills, even if with the CFBC in terms of the REACH program, and quite a number of those things were removed from them. With that being said, it is almost clear that you would have had persons, a number of persons dropping out of school, parents who are not in a position to maintain their children at the CFBC level and sometimes even at the high school level. And some of those persons, although we're not certain with clear evidence, might be some of those who are engaged in those antisocial behaviors that would be leading to the crime. So I'm thinking that once we have our young persons fully engaged, this can assist. And there are several ways that we would be exploring and sharing with the media as we go along, because I believe, for example, you must be dealing with young people in terms of leadership at the lowest level. So there must be intervention programs at the primary school level where young persons can be engaged, knowing that they can be potential or they are potential leaders. I remember I started a program while I was director of youth in terms of the student councils in the primary school, and even having a youth congress, which I adopted from Cuba when I went there. We brought all these young persons in the primary school sitting from being part of a student council, and Fidel Castro visited them. So these are the kind of programs that I'm thinking that would be able to assist, of course, going back to the basics with the introduction or reintroduction of having Boy Scouts and Boys Brigade back in our school system. I started this at the Bronte Welch, one at Tucker Clark, one at Beach Allen, and one at Irish Town Primary. And going forward, this is something that I believe would be able to assist our young persons in developing strong minds, so when those leaders are coming at them because of the training that they would have received as a Boy Scout or Boys Brigade, they would be able to resist what's happening. Thank you.
You have this sort of Trump-like. So you have a sort of situation where whatever programs you make, because it was started by Labour, it doesn't matter whether it's good, bad, or whatever, you just get rid of it. And so that is one of the reasons why he's such a failed leader. Because you go in as the Minister of National Security, he disbanded the Delta Unit, I'm sure you remember the Delta Unit, which was created to fight crime, incidentally. And one of the first things you do as a Minister of National Security is to disband the Delta Unit, just because it was started by C.G. Walwyn and under Labour. Also, there were some other school programs that C.G. Walwyn started for young boys. Immediately they disbanded them. I said they tried to start some back now, but at that time, if they had continued with them, you never know what would happen now. But they immediately disbanded them just because they were started. So again, it's just pure politics and failed leadership.
It is unfortunate that a count on the number of murders is the only way that we can determine what is happening. You see, because one murder less is important, but even if it is one murder in the entire year, it is also something that we should not wish for. When C.G. Walwyn left the police force, there was no question whatsoever as to the downward trend of crime and criminality in St. Kitts-Nevis. No doubt whatsoever, and the statistics are there. I recall that there must have been a year when there was about 35 murders. I'm not certain if it was before 2015 or it was in, what the numbers in 2015? 2011. And what were the numbers in 2015? 32. Right. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, it is not enough just to say, well, in 1 year, 2011, there was 34, 35, and then sometime after it is down. Look at the overall trend. And that is the point we are making. The point we are making is that when C.G. Walwyn took over the police force, within a relatively good period of time, there was control of the criminal activity in the country. Less criminal activity was being experienced. A number of initiatives were put in place. I'm not saying that C.G. Walwyn would not have made mistakes. Who does not? But when he left here, the gangs were being dismantled. There was significantly less gang violence here in St. Kitts-Nevis. And overall, the committal of crimes was down. He left it on a downward trend. And that trend increased because there was a significant undermining of Commissioner C.G. Walwyn by the then opposition, blatantly called for his removal, blamed him for criminal activity, both in Nevis and in St. Kitts, confronted personally by the present Premier of Nevis, who was then one of the elected members in the Nevis Island administration, not Grantley. No, Grantley is one who had attacked him in that way. But I don't want to go there. I can give you the comments that Premier Grantley was making in the federal parliament and in the local island administration. But I don't want to go there because this is not something that is supposed to be looked at in a partisan way. And that is why we are calling for a solution to the problem with inclusiveness. Bring everybody together. Let the stakeholders give their views. The young people, the females who are falling prey as victims of rapes on a regular basis, even though they are not being, reported and pursued. This is the problem that we are having. We need all voices. All voices should be engaged. All ideas, all thoughts should be engaged. One of the things I wish for us to remember at this time is this. As a Christian society, and that is why I like the call that Jeffrey has made, Mr. Hanley has made, for the involvement of the church, for a period of prayer and fasting. Because this is what it gets down to. It gets back down to our Christian values. Historically, we are constantly being reminded that there are certain intrinsic values that reside in the hearts of men. Those were placed there by our Creator. Government was put in place. Government evolved in order to ensure that there would be people-centered governance to protect these values, the basic values, intrinsic values, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that is what we are saying. Life means nothing anymore. Huh? Life, it would appear, means nothing to our society anymore. Almost as if we have no freedom, no liberty to walk, to speak. Women can't go home late at nights anymore. Children are being molested. This is the kind of thing that we are having. And so how can we pursue happiness in an environment and atmosphere of this kind? That is why we call on the church to help us to bring the society back to the realization of these intrinsic values which we believed were placed in the hearts of man by the Creator, Almighty God Himself. That is where we want to go. We want to return to where we can appreciate happiness, where we would have a liberty and freedom of movement within our own space. And there would be a respect for life. Every human life must be respected. Thanks.
Val Thomas,
Yep.
Sugar City FM. And my question is to anyone that want to answer, but I have to make a statement first. As we can recall, leader of the opposition party, the Labour Party, that was Denzel Douglas. You were the head of the government at that time for the past, after 15 election, you were the head of the government for after 2015 election. Before that, you run this country. And if my memory serves me right, even the Honorable Marcelo said that we always want to go back in a statement just not too long. Don't go back. Let's look at the future. That's great. But as I can recall, because I used to cover those stories a lot, I used to be on the street, on the spot, with these murder cases. I can remember a double murder in constituency number 3, 1 o'clock during the course of the day. Murders up by the pizza place in constituency 3, number 3, during the afternoon. Murders in constituency number 1 during the evening time. Constituency number 1, a lot of murders. Constituency number 2, murders. Constituency number 3, murders under your watch. And nothing was done to solve those murders. The commissioners of police. Let me finish.
You can't say nothing was done to stop these murders. I just explained to you. No. No, just a minute. But you have to be careful with what you are saying. But you can't say nothing was done.
In your opinion, to respond.
You can't say that.
Can you respond that?
Of course. No. Let me respond now. Let me respond now.
What was that?
A lot was done. We revamped the police force in several different ways. We brought in a number of initiatives. We created at one time a separation in the Ministry of National Security, made it Homeland Security, and created a National Crime Council where the management, the ministerial management of the situation at that time was spread across 3 different ministries. In fact, at that time, you mentioned the triple murder. It was the Honorable His Excellency Sam Kondo who was the minister at that time. And so we took a dismantling of the ministry, took the police and the defense force away from the entire ministry, and that was being administered by 3 different ministers of government. We brought in a new commissioner of police back in 2012 or thereabout. Went through a number of initiatives, new initiatives which the Honorable Marcelo Liebert alluded to a moment ago. I told you, as a result of those initiatives, we saw a downward trend on criminal activity here in St. Kitts-Nevis. The gangs which we said were responsible for a lot of those crimes, his approach, the approach of C.J. Walwyn was completely different. Rooted, yes, in community policing, but to a large extent took an attitude where the gang members were reporting basically to him and a dismantling was taking place. So you can't say that nothing was done.
All right, thank you.
You can't say that.
Thank you. Honorable Denzel Douglas, you brought in C.G. Walwyn. Commissioner Walwyn locked up.
Ask your question.
Okay. Why did C.J. Walwyn locked up civilians, hold them for 1 year without going to the court? If you see them in a standing...
You've asked your question, let me
Yes.
answer. Right. C.J. Walwyn pursued a policy which he thought would have brought the best results in saving lives and in curbing criminality here in St. Kitts and Nevis. we were very strongly supportive of C.G. Walwyn's initiatives to bring crime under control, which he did. I said earlier that C.G. Walwyn is not a perfect human being. And so even if some persons were locked up and were not tried, those people's fundamental rights were being preserved in the court. They went to court, and wherever the court said that it was not the best to have done, then they were compensated. But in the process, he brought a lessening of the criminal activity and the murder rate down in St. Kitts-Nevis.
Thank you. My last question.
I don't think we would want you to be asking.
Okay. No, well, I could have asked him 3 straight, but you didn't allow me to. You interrupt.
Go ahead and do that.
Okay. Now, my last question. When you were the leader of the country, under your leadership, we had the evidence room broken in, gun was missing for a murder case, pounds of weed were missing. At the highest police level, office was broken in, counterfeit money was used, and the person got caught. And there are many other things under your leadership. What did you do?
That I want to take this opportunity to just lend some hard figures to what was just being discussed. C.G. Walwyn was the Commissioner of Police from 2012 to 2014. Under his leadership, between 2012 and 2014, there was a near 30% decrease in crime overall. So when he took office in 2012, which was a decision that the government then took based on, at the time, was an increase and upsurge in crime. The government took bold decisions, and the former Prime Minister has outlined a number of them. And in 2012 to 2014, when we left office, there was a downward trend of crime of 30% overall. Since then, there has been an 80% uptick in crime between 2015 and 2018. So in the last 3 years, 3 years of the Labour administration, 2012, 2013, 2014, there was a 30% decrease in crime. These are figures that you can check yourself. And from 2015 to 2018, there has been a near 80% increase in crime. So if you're going to compare about the last part of this Labour administration and this now of the this current administration, there is really no comparison. For instance, the leader of the opposition also said that it is unfortunate that we are gauging crime by simply the murders. In 1 year, for instance, you had so many gun incidents that if they were on target, you would have had over 50 murders or thereabout in St. Kitts-Nevis. And so, if we want to look at figures, in 2012, after 2011, when you had 30-odd murders, which was very high, in 2012, it had dropped to 18. In 2013, 21. In 2014, 21. Since this government has taken office, there has not been that low, for instance, in the murders alone. In 2015, 28. In 2016, 31. In 2017, 23. And we're already at 19 in August here. Now, these are not statistics that you want to harp on, but we want to get the propaganda out of the discussion. And let us just look at the hard, cold evidence that is before us. There is a systematic problem that we all have to be a part of. If we go back to this thing where, okay, I'm going to start blaming you for crime and you for crime and you are this and so on, we will get nowhere. And that is not what we are here for. Now, Additionally, to answer the questions now from Mr. Huey, who asked me in general, is the government solely responsible? Now, in my presentation, I think in maybe the second statement I made, I said, and I'll repeat, we have maintained while in office and out of office that crime is not solely a government issue. We believed then, and we believe now, that crime fighting requires, in fact, demands the involvement of all stakeholders across the state to effectively combat criminal activity in our country. But what we are saying is that although the government is not solely responsible, they are responsible for the leadership of crime fighting in this country, and that is where they are lacking. I will also use this point to answer a question from SKN Vibes, that for instance, you can have a captain of a team playing in the middle of the game. You ask me the question of, if the government is failing on crime, what use is it then to put somebody else in the government to lead crime? Well, first of all, we need to have an election first to remove that whole cast. And we can't have an election tomorrow. And so while the Prime Minister is failing right now, it is the prudent thing to do to hand over to someone else to see if they can get better results until the people of the Federation has a chance to make a decision as to who should continue in the leadership. It is like, for instance, a team, as I was saying, where they're playing in the game and the captain is making a mess of the game. The only decision you have is to find someone else on the team to captain until the game is done and until you could get a new 11 on the field. So when our new 11 gets on the field, we believe that we will be able to show the type of leadership that is necessary. To further answer your question, why it is necessary to change the Minister of National Security urgently, it is because one of the things that is going to be absolutely critical in this fight against crime is the willingness for the leaders to put aside petty politicking. I dare you that Dr. Timothy Harris, as you are sitting across from me, cannot bring himself to sit across the table from Dr. Denzel Douglas and have a meaningful discussion about how we can move forward in crime. Can't happen. It will not happen. But I suppose, and I believe, there are others in his cabinet who may have that ability to have a dialogue with people who you disagree with. The character of Dr. Timothy Harris does not allow him to engage people who oppose him. Can't happen. It has never happened. It will never happen. And so his leadership is non-existent if it is required to bring the country together. You think that Dr. Timothy Harris really can sit in a room in Dr. Douglas, and that is what he's afraid of? I don't know why. You have to put away those childish, boyish behaviors if we are going to get anywhere with crime fighting. You must be able, as mature politicians, to be able to disagree vehemently on policies of those who oppose you, but you must be able to willing to sit down, even if you know that everything, you will not agree on everything. Timothy Harris will only join something unless, one, he's the leader, aka forming this coalition, and two, he will not sit down to be castigated or to be challenged by anybody around him. So he cannot lead, and that is what is going to be required in crime fighting. You're going to have to be able to say, you know what? We are at a stage in our country where crime transcends politics. It affects everybody. People will go home this afternoon to find that their homes have been broken into. Some of them will support Labour. Some of them will support PAM. There are families crying across this nation who support all types of political parties, but they have been touched, hurt, scarred by the scourge of crime. And it is about time that the leaders in this country, whether they be government or whether they be opposition, put aside politics for one moment to say, you know what? one of these days I'll be gone. But I have children. They will have children. And I want to rest in my mind, to feel comforted in my mind, that I did everything in my power to make sure that they had a safe environment to live in. And finally, Huey asks, how do you overcome the perception that of the politicization of crime? Well, firstly, we will not go on a bandwagon to blame Timothy Harris for everything under the sun. I recall the days when it could be a pickpocket in town and Dr. Douglas' name was called. I remember a popular radio DJ on the air making light of the situation say, even if you get bite, blaming Dougie. Everything was blaming Dr. Douglas. And so we will not do that. We will not stoop to the level to believe that somehow Timothy Harris is the orchestra of all the crime in this country. We believe that we have to make political statements on crime because it is political action that is going to be necessary to help bring down the levels of crime. But we will not play that game to say somehow that everything wrong in this country is because of Timothy Harris. We are bigger and more mature than that. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to touch was what Dr. Jeffrey Henley touched on with respect to the programs and so forth and how it's affecting young people. But one of the major problems here is the issue of the economy. There's a link between poor economic performance and crime. The young people in this country are suffering tremendously. Our economy presently is growing less than 2%. Unemployment is hitting the population and it's hitting the youth more significantly. And the youth are the ones who are suffering. So within that ambit, we understand that if the youth cannot find jobs, meaningful jobs, every day you have a number of youths who come to visit me at my practice and say, Dr. Joe, can you help me with a job? There are no jobs out there for us. We cannot find employment. The young Buchanan who got shot recently came to my office and he said, Dr. Joe, I wash cars. Can you please allow me to wash your car? The morning I was calling him over and over again and couldn't get a response. I asked my secretary, call Buchanan and ask him if he wants to really come and do it because I understand his situation. Only then to get a picture on my phone and I send it to my secretary and say, is that Buchanan who we were calling in the morning who is now dead? So the youths in this country are suffering and the economy is failing. That is why we say that there is poor leadership. Not only in national security, but as far as the economy is concerned. The economy is a disaster and it needs addressing. And I don't think that this government has done it effectively. And the youths are the one with high employment, cannot find jobs, no sense of hope, and they're living in despair. And I would not justify carrying out criminal activity, but when there are no opportunities, there seems to be an increase in criminal activity. And so the youth issue, as Jeffrey pointed out, must be addressed, but you need a vibrant economy also to help the youths of this country.
Does the Labour Party have a good relationship with civil society, both in and outside of government?
Good afternoon, Precious Mills, the Labour spokesman. Obviously, the issue of crime is a very serious one taken by the opposition, and so I would want to know, going forward, what kind of campaign does the opposition see itself running? Campaign leading up to the next general election.
There's a lot of talk about political maturity, and you usually will hear that coming from whichever party is in opposition. In your 20 years, did you ever sit down with the leader of the opposition at any point for similar consultations?
Well, thank you for these last few questions.
Earlier one?
No. We still have one to be answered. You want another one? Come on. I want to really say to Val that we would hope that these press conferences are really being held to share information and not to and not to attempt to provoke unnecessary situations. Because you see, for a journalist of your standing, so many years experience, to bring to this debate, this very, very serious debate on crime and how we need to find solutions, to say that, well, under your watch it happened too, so what? You know. But the whole point is that the people back in 2015 elected this government to resolve a lot of those issues. We were blamed left, right, and center for the increased criminal activity in the country at that time. They said to the electorate, they had the answers. C.G. Walwyn was no good. The police high command was no good. Wallace was no good. Just kick everybody out. Bring us in, and we will do better. It was Dr. Drew who this afternoon, in his own opening statement, alluded to the cheers that went through the room when the Prime Minister had his first meeting with the security forces. We get rid of the man at last, and everybody cheered. Cheered because I think they really believed that there would be a better dispensation under Timothy Harris. The same officers today are totally appalled at the high level of political interference in the management of the police force. You yourself mentioned that C.G. Walwyn arrested people, they were held, but each one of them was free to go to the court with his lawyer and seek redress. And where the judge interpreted his situation to be where he was wronged and he was abused, he was compensated. I did not have any control whatsoever in the functioning of the court. Today, Dr. Harris commands 2 of his sisters to sit on cases, determine judicial matters that come before the court in St. Kitts-Nevis. 2 of them have been commanded by him. Just a minute, let me make my statement. Let me give you my answers. 2 of them. Why would you want to have a police, an assistant commissioner of police, irrespective of what you think his political affiliation is? Why would you want to remove him? Because he's a gazetted officer. He could only be removed by the Prime Minister. He's the minister, not only of national security, but he's also the minister responsible for the human affairs, human resources. So any kind of directive must come from him. Why would you want investigators who come in to investigate what you said happened before? It not only happened under my watch, it happened on several watches before. By Simmons, by Bradshaw, by Limo, all of them had their cases of that kind of thing happening in the police force. But these guys said that they had the answer. These guys were the ones who said that they will bring a different type of management of the police force. Here's the difference. Instead of you allowing the advisor and others, I believe, who were with him to do the right thing and bring in polygraphers The Prime Minister is wrong in trying to determine who these professionals should polygraph. Totally wrong, unprofessional, and corrupt in determining who should be polygraphed when experts have been brought into the country to do these things. It's the management that we are talking about. The lack of leadership, inserting corruption in the management of the police force from the ministerial level. That's what we are condemning here today. When you're going to spite a whole community or several communities, you're going to shut down Kitts-Nevis Hill, which employed hundreds of young people in the Sadlers, Tabernacle, Mansion, St. Paul's, Newton Ground, and Sandy Point areas. Shut it down simply because it was put there under the watch of Douglas. When the Capistia farm, which was left there, where people who were terminated as a result of the close of the sugar industry chose to do small farming to feed their families. Shut it down. What do you expect the people to do? Where are the people going to get food? How are they going to live? And that is what Jeffrey is talking about. Lack of employment takes away the will of our people to work. And that is why crime creeps in. That's why we are here today. We don't have all of the answers. We are not perfect. We know that. But the point is that it is the management of the situation that we are speaking about. We are in a crisis. We are in a crisis in the police force, a crisis in national security, and the Prime Minister has failed to provide the leadership that is required if we are going to get out of this. And so I want to say, finally, I want to say very, very clearly that we would continue to make our appeal to the stakeholders of our country in sitting down and finding a solution to crime. The Labour Party has always reached out to civil society, whether it is in government or it is out of government. I have sat down with some of our harshest critics with no vexation and listened to what they had to say. I have sat with the opposition leader of the past. I am not afraid to do that. But the reason why Dr. Harris cannot sit is because he does not intend to lead the police force and the Ministry of National Security. It's poor Quealy. It's he who is blaming every single day. Every single day. Imagine one of your own security officers protecting you. He chooses to leave, to be transferred. He wants to be transferred for whatever reason. And you're going to trump up charges that a man broke into the evidence room to get a few ounces of drugs that make any sense to anybody? Tarnishing people's image and professionalism in the police force simply because he don't want to work with you anymore? That is how a leader behaves? And that is where we are saying that the time has come for us to have a different approach to this. We want to be inclusive. We want to make sure that we do not cast blame on anyone, but we must call a spade when we see it's a spade. We are saying today that there is lack of leadership on the part of the Prime Minister. And again, I say, if you cannot do it, move aside and let somebody like Mark Brantley then become the Minister of National Security here in St. Kitts-Nevis. I want to thank you. I want to make it clear that in the next election, because of the, that's it, because of the nature of crime in St. Kitts-Nevis, because we believe it really needs to have all hands on deck, crime will have to be one of the critical issues pursued in the upcoming elections. But we can't wait for the upcoming elections because people are dying on a regular basis as a result of the criminal activity. Too many people are becoming victims, and that is why, even though we are not in a campaign as such, we have to speak out about it, because we are representing real people. Living in constituency number 2, they are residents, they are children, they are women folk. People are being killed. The young man in College Street, was it in your constituency he was? Or in number 1? Buchanan. He died in 2. So, I mean, this is what I'm saying. Every single day, people are suffering, are feeling it. Why would the Prime Minister make all kinds of song and dance about the state of the St. Paul's police station, shuts it down? Almost 2 years, shuts it down. No replacement, when he himself has said that St. Paul's has become a hotbed for crime. His own words. But he shuts down the police station. In other areas where the police station is shut down, he hires or rents another building and still have the police there. In St. Paul's, nothing of that kind. But he says, his analysis is that it is a hotbed for crime. And the state of the police station was such that he had to close it down. For God's sake, if you close it down, replace it, hire another building. That's what we are saying.
That brings us to the end of today's press conference.